What are some of the other outside Yosemite and in the Alps, other places? Tell us about some of the other things you've done.
Well, quickly in the Alps, we did with John Harlan I think it was a year after, maybe 2 years after I climbed that with Gary. He and I put up what's called the Super Direct on the west face of the Drew, and that got a pretty good reputation, and that was quintessentially a American big wall sort of thing, because it had very difficult nailing, pitoning as we call it, because there was a lot of loose rock and very difficult and somewhat dangerous sections, and so that suited particularly my experience, and it was a pretty good thing to have. And I put up some first ascents on cliffs in Switzerland, near Lausanne, Switzerland, and we've been to South America. I didn't get up anything in Patagonia. The weather was pretty bad down there, but we've been to Canada a number of times, made several first ascents there, first ascents in
what period of time were you climbing in
This
Canada?
is the mid-60s, basically, or through the 60s.
Right.
Actually, I think the last time we went to the Kachatna Spires of Alaska was 72, so it eked on into there. And throughout the United States, I've climbed all over.
To go back to Yosemite and a little bit different approach to that, there are obviously amazing things, as we saw from Lynn Hill's presentation last night with you here at the AAC meeting. The differences in some degree equipment, just differences in approaches. How do you see what's happening in Yosemite today? I mean, you still go back and climb, I assume, don't you? What do you think when you go down there and I mean, people obviously recognize you, and
actually they don't.
They don't.
That's one of the interesting developments. Is I can walk into a crowd of climbers who are on some cliff in Yosemite, and nobody has a clue that.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a shock when it started happening, but I've quite adjusted to it now.
Because I've gone around with Pratt a good bit, and there's always somebody recognizes Chuck.
Yeah.
And I would think that would be true down there. But
there's just an awful lot of new climbers.
Lot of new climbers. Well, you're one of the reasons. But how do you, having set the standards in Yosemite, that people, no matter whatever happens with Lynn Hill or the future Lynn Hills or Nancy Fagans or whoever, people will always look back to the Salathé route and the nose. What do you think of what's going on now? How do you view that?
Well, I view it essentially with hope and enthusiasm. I see that I don't agree with everything that's going on. In fact, I've been outspoken against some practices, some modern practices. But on the whole, I look out and I see heroes. I see people that have great ideals and who have the highest possible standards, and who are willing to train and to give it everything they've got, to get everything out of themselves so they can operate at the very highest possible level they can. And this has always been the ideal. It's always been the goal, and that's the beauty, you see, is that doesn't change, and that's kind of the sacred fire, if you will, that we all try to keep alive.
Right.
And I see these young climbers who have the highest aspirations, noble, frankly, is a word I would use, and I admire them, and I think that they are indeed keeping the flame alive, and that's pretty wonderful.
Ron, have you ever climbed with some of well, these are, I guess, they're almost old-timers, but Ron Kalk and Jerry Moffitt and John Long. Have you had the opportunity to climb?
Oh yeah, I've climbed with Ron a little bit, and with John more. In fact, John worked with Lynn Hill that time at my climbing school in Telluride.
Oh yeah,
briefly. And of course, he's gone on to be quite a spokesman for how to climb. He's done books and videos and stuff on it.
Yeah.
And I find that I can get out with, well, frankly, with just about anyone, except anyone who loves climbing. I can have fun climbing, whether they're, can climb things I couldn't even imagine, or whether I can climb things they couldn't even imagine. As long as we have that shared enthusiasm, I always enjoy myself.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Is in the numbering system, is there going to be any limit, you think, on that? I mean, I've never paid a great deal of attention to it, but you were saying last night that you early on were doing, you did a 5.9 when you were very young, and 5.9 up until just a few years ago was world class. Was it not? And where do you think that's going to go? Do you have any idea?
Well, a couple of things. One, said things were impossible before, and I've been wrong again and again and again. I'm happy to be wrong, and I've just given my honest. I never would have believed that someone could come up and climb Sentinel on site, never having climbed before, and do it free without a rope, as Henry Barber did in marvelous style. I never would have believed that anyone would climb what they now call Astroman. Not only climb it free, we made the second ascent and used pitons most of the way, but climb it without a rope, as Peter Croft did several times. And I would never have dreamt that anybody could free climb the Salathé Wall or the nose. I would have said, no, that'll never happen. And so I'm not much of a prophet. And I'm pretty optimistic. I consider myself realistic, but on the side of just about anything's possible. And yet, even so, these climbers do things that astonish me and that I wouldn't have believed could be done. So who's to say? We used to say, well, yeah, anything's possible except they'll never climb a totally blank wall. But I tell you, Lynn Hill sure looked like she was doing that, coming pretty close, amazingly close. I've never seen someone move up something that looks so totally blank the way she did.
Yeah, see, that was, and it's so rare to get, especially to be able to catch that with a film or video camera. I remember probably ABC, I think, Wide World of Sports, did, I think Jerry Moffitt and maybe Ron Kalk on Lost
Arrow Spire?
Lost Arrow Spire.
I remember seeing that.
Live on television. Quite a interesting piece of work.
Yes.
But that was a very rare bit of camera. And of course, now with the weight of cameras and the ability to I can't think of the term, but you don't have to have a cable going in where you go, the satellite stuff and things like that. So that's, I think, becoming easier, and hopefully we're going to see more of that, because I think it's very exciting work. You can never create the feeling of hanging off a 3,000-foot wall with nothing but air underneath you, but you can bring more excitement to it.
Certainly.